little bit cool sometimes. Okay, so if I begin the learning sponsors, all right. Year of Learning, Sue and Arnie Gerlich in memory of Malka Perlman and Philip Mann. And Yisrael Donovan ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch and Beryl ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Yosef Meir ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. And Yerivka Pearl Rosner bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch. And in memory of the family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael, David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Perel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Cheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. Marcia Fetterbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Fetterbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon. Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Eli Bas Yaakov. Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Shadell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gidler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gidler, Charna Bas Yeshaya. Friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. A Month of Learning by Stanley Presser, in memory of his wife, Chayalea bat Zev Cohen, Mindel and David Cheslow, in memory of her mother, Shosha bat Ber Leib, Carol and Josh Sanborn, in memory of her mother, Yita bat Nachman ben Yamin. Have a Week of Learning, sponsored by Aviva Hochshander Zilzberger and Vernon Zilzberger, in memory of her late husband, Ephraim ben Yitzchak Aryeh, and her mother, Malka bat Yitzchar. Marsha and Gary Schrager, in memory of her father, Shmuel ben Meir. Benny Bahar, in memory of her husband, Yitzchak ben Menachem. And today is what, the 26th? We don't have any days of learning. So we'll say, Amen. Shamas Hevaliyah, Craig Rafia, Velp Yeshir Shamatliya, and L'chol B'nai Israel, a good Gebench.
Amen.
Okay, so let's see how we're doing.
Amen,
Okay.
amen. Did you get my
Harvey,
text, Rabbi, with the diagram?
No,
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
I did not.
Right.
It's possible that it's because I would think I would have received it if you sent it to my email. Okay.
No, I sent it to you a text message.
Oh, all right. I'll have to look for it then. Okay. So we ended up, okay, on the top of Mem Hey Amud Aleph, dealing with varieties of gold. Okay. And we simply see there that Rav Ashi, we said, instead of 7 varieties, that what was Rav Chisda said, I believe, we found he suggested there were 5. Okay, Chamishahen, Kol Chad V'Chad, Itbe, Zahav, Zahav Tov. And each one of them has, let's say, gold and good gold, or gold and more refined gold. Okay, 2 varieties. Tanya Nami Hachi, and it seems that way the way it's taught. The Chol Yom Haya Zahava Yarok V'Hayom Adom. Every other day it was, right? The coal pan was made of greenish gold, and this day reddish. V'Hainu Zahav Parvayim Shedomeh L'Dam Hapari. And why specifically on Yom Kippur? Because then it was similar in color to the blood of the bulls. Okay? So we said that the next sections of the Mishnah all deal with those examples. Next section, of the Gemara, deals with those sections of the Mishnah that continued to bring the comparison between a everyday Tamid and certain aspects of the Tamid and the Avoda on Yom Kippur. Okay, so we're going to see quite a number of these discussions, and then the Gemara is going to sort of go into more detail in one particular area. All right, so we start with a new statement from the Mishnah. B'chol yom makrif paras shachrit v'chulei. Every day, it said, on a normal day, the priest, the Kohen, offered half a mana of incense in the morning and another half, in the afternoon. But on this day, on Yom Kippur, right, the Kohen Gadol added to it, right? And so it continued. B'chol yom hayta daka. On this day, it was very pure, very fine. V'hayom daka min hadaka. And this day, the Mishnah said it was particularly ground, super fine. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braita, daka. It implies that it was fine. Ma Talmud lomar. So what is the text trying to tell us? V'halau kvar ne'amar. Wasn't it already said elsewhere in another pasuk? V'sachakta mimena hadek. And that you shall grind it finely. I'll put it that way. Ela lahavi daka min hadaka. Implying that you should bring it super fine, on Yom Kippur. Next example from the Mishnah. B'chol yom kohanim olim b'mizracho shel keves. On a normal day or other days, the Kohanim would go up on the eastern side of the ramp, and we knew that the Mishnah was implying that they would go down on the western side of the ramp. Okay? Da'amar mar, as was said by the master, kol pinot she'ata poneh, I'm going to use the word direction, which one would turn, lo hiyu ela derech yamin lemizrach. That implied that they would only turn if they were always turning to the right, in other words, always facing east, and they would go around the Mizbeach, therefore in a counterclockwise manner. Okay? Next piece. V'hayom, in other words, on Yom Kippur, olim be'emtza, v'yordim be'emtza, implying that not just the Kohen Gadol, but the other Kohanim as well could go up the middle and down the middle. So, of course, we would ask Manishtana, right? Why is it that they make so different, even for them? Okay, my Tama, what's the reasoning? Mishum kvodo to Kohen Gadol, because of the respect, the eminence of the Kohen Gadol, that he should not have to walk on the side, but walk in the middle. So they show that respect to him by imitating him. Okay. Furthermore, b'chol yom kohen, and we're talking about Kohen Gadol, mekadesh yadav v'raglav min hakior. Okay. Normally, the Kohen Gadol would wash his hands and feet from the laver, right in the Hazarah, just like any other Kohen. Okay. So what happens? Why on this day does he get to use a golden flask, like a utensil? Ma'itama, mishum kvodo shel Kohen Gadol. Again, because of the honor due the Kohen Gadol. Here too. Okay. What's next? Another example. Okay. And with this example, we're going to get into I'll call it a slight digression. B'chol yom hayu sham arba ma'arachot. On normal, otherwise regular days, there were 4 wood piles, 4 arrangements of wood on the top of the Mizbeach. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braita. B'chol yom hayu shtayim ma'arachot, l'hayom shalosh. This Braita says most days there were 2, and on this day implying Yom Kippur 3. Echad ma'aracha gedola, one was the great, let's say, arrangement of wood, the larger pile. Ve'achat ma'aracha shniya shel ketoret, and one was I'll call it simply a lesser pile. And that second pile that was somewhat lesser was for incense. Ve'achat shemosifin bo bayom, and one, a third pile, that they added specifically for that day, for the additional offerings of that day. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That was the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi, however, disagrees. Rabbi Yossi Omer, B'chol Yom Shalosh. On most days, there were 3 piles, he says. V'hayom Arba. And on this day, Yom Kippur, there were 4. And he lists them. Achat shel ma'aracha gedola. One was the large or greater pile of wood. Ve'achat ma'aracha shniya shel ketoret. One was the lesser or second pile for the incense. Ve'achat shel kiyum ha'esh. And the other, a third one, was for maintaining, or upkeep of the fire. Okay? Now, what was this? Why was this important? Okay, this was important because sometimes, if you had a lot of korbanos and you had a lot of fat on the animals, it could be that you needed to keep that fire going, and you needed a source from which to transfer to the larger pile, and that would be the case. The Echad shemosifin bo bayom, says Rabbi Yossi, and the 4th, which was added specifically for that day. Okay, and that was for the burning of the incense. Remember that 4th for that day, particularly the incense that was going to be brought inside the Kodesh Kadoshim. Let's go on now. Another viewpoint. And in this case, Rabbi Meir says as follows. B'chol yom arba'a, according to Rabbi Meir, there were 4 arrangements of wood, right? Echad shel ma'aracha gedola, one was the great ma'aracha, right, the large one. The echad shel ma'aracha shniya shel ketoret, and one, right, of the second for the incense. The echad shel kiyum ha'esh, and one for maintaining the fire. The echad la'evarim u'pdarim shelo nitaklu miba'erev, and there was another separate fire, for any animal parts, or limbs or fats, that did not get consumed on the main arrangement of wood, and therefore anything that was left over, so to speak, from the tamid of the night before would then be burnt on this particular arrangement. The echat shemosifin bo bayom, and one other that was burning again to be added that day for the incense in the Holy of Holies. So the Gemara looks at all of these, at least 3 different opinions. Rabbi Yehuda, who said that there was, right, a certain number. Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Meir. So what do we have here? Gemara tells us, the Kuli Alma mihat tarte itlo. Everybody seems to be in agreement that there was certainly at least tarte, at least 2. Minavan, how do we know this? Amar Kra, because a pasuk says, Hi ha'olah al mokdah al hamizbeach kol halayla. It is the burnt offering on the flame on the altar all night. Zo maracha gedolah. That's the great arrangement of wood, the large pile, Now, furthermore, the pasuk then says in the same pasuk, "Ve'esh hamizbeach tukad bo," then the fire of the altar shall be kept burning. So that seems to imply you had the first pyre. The implication is, well, that implies that there's got to be at least a second pyre on the mizbeach as well, if only minimally to help to keep the first one going. Okay, and so the Gemara then says Zomar Achashniya Shel Ketoret, and he understood it to be the arrangement of wood, the pyre, for the burning of the incense. Now, Rabbi Yossi. So what about Rabbi Yossi's view? Kiyum ha'esh minala. Where then does he base? How does he understand that second part of the pasuk in terms of maintaining a fire? Nafkale min v'ha'esh al hamizbech tukad bo. He derives it instead from a different pasuk. And that pasuk says, and the fire upon the altar shall be kept burning. So that's Rabbi Yossi's view. Okay, what about Rabbi Yehuda's view? Rabbi Yehuda asks the Gemara, Hahu lahatzatat alita huda'ata. He says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that second pyre, its purpose is to be able to light the kindling that's used for the larger pyre, for the larger maracha. Okay? It's the kindling of the wood chips. The Tanya is taught in the Braita. Haya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, that Rabbi Yehuda would ask the question, Minayim lahatzatat alita shelo tehei ela birosho shel mizbeach. How do we know that the wood chips, the kindling, for the purpose of the main pyre, has to be down on the top of the altar? Okay, Talmud Lomar, V'ha'esh al hamizbeach tukad bo, where the pasuk says that the fire has to be on the altar kept burning. Now, Rabbi Yossi would challenge him and say the following, Menayan she'oseh maracha l'kiyum ha'esh. How do we know even that we have to even make a pyre, a pile of wood, an arrangement of wood for that purpose of maintaining the fire? Talmud Lomar, says the text, Va'esh al hamizbeach tukad bo. Same pasuk.
Right.
Okay? Very same pasuk, but notice they each derive a different message, a different requirement from it. Okay. So Gemara is not done with this digression and asks for Rabbi Yossi, if that's the case, Hatzatat alita minale, then where does he get the basis for saying, how do you light the kindling for the large, right, for the big pyre? Nafkale mehacha to nafkale the Rabbi Shimon. He derives it from the same place that Rabbi Shimon does. So now we have to assume that the Gemara is going to give us what Rabbi Shimon holds, right? The Tanya, as taught elsewhere in a Braita, V'natnu b'nei Aharon haKohen eish ha'am mizbeach, that the sons of Aaron, right, the priest, placed the fire on the altar. Li'meid al hatzatat alita shelo tehei ela b'kohen kasher. Says Rabbi, we're assuming for the moment Rabbi Shimon, that this seems to imply that the lighting of the kindling must be done only by a, let's use the word valid for the moment, Kohen, ubeklei sharet, and with appropriate sacred utensils. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That was the view of, seems, of Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rabbi Shimon, but Rabbi Shimon then says, V'chi ta'aleh al da'atcha, shazar koreh v'gabei mizbeach. You said it has to be a valid Kohen. Do you think it's even possible for a non-Kohen to come in any close proximity to the Mizbeach? Ella, rather, learn it this way, says Rabbi Shimon. Limed al hatzatat alita, shalo tehe ella birosho shel Mizbeach. But therefore we learn that the kindling must be done also on the very top of the Mizbeach. So Rabbi Yehuda has to respond, right? Ime hatam hava amina. If you're saying it was derived there, I would say the following. Kai e'ara va'ave b'mapucha. Kamash malan. Let him, maybe he should be able to come down and do it on the ground level and light the kindling there and use some sort of a contraption. Let's call it like a bellows, right? B'mapucha, in order to make the fire rise and then catch on the maracha, the big pile. Kamash malan comes to teach us that that's not acceptable. That's not the case. Now, we've only dealt with Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi, right? And Shimon and Rabbi, right? What about Rabbi Meir's view that said ultimately there were, I believe, 5, right? Isn't that what he said on Yom Kippur? So what happens? The Rabbi Meir, Evarim uptarim, shalonit aklu mi ba'erev minale. When it comes to having a separate pyre, a separate arrangement of wood for the burning of those pieces that were left over, let's say, from the previous night's tamid, and didn't get totally consumed, on what basis, right? Does he say this? Nafkale meant va'esh. He learns it from the word va'esh. Remember, it said va'esh or v'ha'esh al hamizbeach tukadbo. Va'esh, okay, and fire. So it means an additional one. Okay, v'rabanan vav lo darshe. The rabbis don't expound the vav in that case. The Rabbanan, and according to the rabbis, what about these leftover pieces, fats, animal limbs, whatever, from the previous night's tamid? What do you do with those, right? Evarim upradim, updarim, shalom etaklumi be'erev, ma yaved leho. So what do you do with them? Mahadar laho l'maracha gedola. According to the rabbis, they can be put back on the large maracha, the large wood pile. The Tanya is taught in the Braita, Minayan le'evarim u'pdarim shalom klumi ba'erev. How do we know what to do with the limbs and fats that weren't consumed the night before? As we go over to the next Amud, right? What happens? Shesodran al gabe hamizbeach, that they are arranged on the altar. Ve'im ein machazikan, and if the space then on that maracha is not big enough, shesodran al keves or al gabe sovev ad she'aseh maracha gedola b'sodran, that you sort of just put them on the side, on the ramp, or you put them on the, right, on the sovev, on the, what we'll call for the moment, the walkway, the right, around the Mizbeach, until there's room on the large pyre, and then put it on top. Talmud Lomar, Asher tochal ha'esh et ha'olah al ha'mizbeach. Okay? Saying, citing the pasuk, the fire will consume all of the burnt offering on the altar.
That sounds like a smelly mess to leave us with the next day.
Mm-hmm. Just be glad you're not a Kohen. Yeah. Okay, in those days, Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir now says the following. Ikule Ola, that parts of a burnt offering that were, so to speak, left over, Atam Machazir, those things, those you could put back. V'i Atam Machazir, Ikule Ketoret. He says, adding to the discussion, but any leftover incense, that you can't put back. Titani Rabbi Chananya bar min yomi, the Bey Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, is taught by a particular sage, Rabbi Chananya ben Yomi, from the school of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Okay, namely, what did he teach us? Asher tochal ha'esh et ha'olah al ha'mizbeach. He darshaned the pasuk, that which the fire will consume of the burnt offering on the mizbeach, on the altar. Ikule olah atamachazir, ve'i atamachazir ikule ketoret. Okay, and implying that you can return on the mizbeach, okay, the animal parts or the fat, but you cannot put the incense back. Okay? Now, having said this, okay, Gemara again is headed for a slight tangent. The Kuli Alma mihat mosifin bo bayom eat laho. Mina laho. Everybody does seem to agree, says the Gemara, that we said that an additional maracha, an additional wood pile, was added specifically on Yom Kippur. Right? They gave the others other reasons, 2, 3, 4, etc., for different things, but they always added all three of them. Right? But what was their basis? Minalahu. Nafkalahu min vehai. And they learned that from the pasuk and the fire on the altar. Right? Namely what? Va'afilu laman delo daresh vav. And even the Rabbanan, who didn't previously expound the vav on the word va'esh, nevertheless here, in this case, they did vav hey daresh. Okay, they did expound veha esh as implying and the, implying, well, that must refer to a specific example. Okay? Now, we proceed. Eish tamid. We seem to say that this means that there was an eternal, an ongoing fire on the altar. Lamayata asks the Gemara, what does it come to teach us? It's necessary to come to teach us the following about the pasuk: Eish tamid tukad al hamizbeach lo tichber. That there was a perpetual, ongoing fire on the mizbeach, and it was kept burning, and it would not go out. They made al ma'aracha shniya shel ketoret. This is how we learn that there had to be at least a second pyre, the second arrangement of wood that was being burnt for the incense. Shelo tehei ela al hamizbeach hachitzon, that it must have been arranged also on the large outer altar. So the Gemara then Gedura says, Eish machta u'menorah minayin. So if that's the case, okay, when we want to have fire for the coal pans or for the candelabra, where does it come from? Vidinhu. And this seems to be logical, right? we seem to be able to derive it as follows. Ne'emra eish b'ketoret. We see that it says that there's fire when it talks about the incense. V'ne'emra eish b'machta u'menorah. And we also find the word fire relating to the coal pan and to the candelabra. Malahalan al mizbeach hachitzon, afkan al hamizbeach hachitzon. So since these others, all right, the incense fire is essentially found on the outside altar, likewise it would imply, okay, from the commonality of the words, Sereshava, right, that should apply also to the coal pan and the candelabra. That fire should also come from a source on the outer altar. Oh, or perhaps, says the Gemara, kilach v'derech zo. Maybe we can explain it in an alternative manner and say it this way. Nemra eish b'ketoret. It is stated fire in regards to the incense. V'nemra eish b'machta u'menorah. And it's stated fire in regards to the coal pan and the candelabra. And by the way, this is I'll say, the more classical way of presenting a Gezerah Shama. Malahalan b'samuchlo. In this case, the same way this is stated and found here. Af machta menorah b'samuchlo. So therefore, here too, we find that it's stated and it's regarded here as well. Talmud Loma. Also, we learn as follows: Eish tamid tukad al hamizbeach lo tichbeh, where the pasuk tells us that there is a perpetual fire on the altar and it cannot go out. Eish tamid amarti lecha lo tehei ela b'rosho shel mizbeach hachitzon, implying, okay, that this ongoing perpetual fire that was talked about cannot be on any place other than on the outside. What? Altar. Okay. Lamadnu eish menorah. Therefore, we've learned about the fire for the candelabra. Eish l'machta minayim. What about the fire for the coal pans? Okay, for the incense coal pans for Yom Kippur? Well, we give almost a similar answer. V'dinhu, and this seems logical to present as follows: Ne'emra eish b'machta, v'ne'emra eish b'menorah. We find it states fire in regards to the coal pan. For the incense, we find that it states fire in regards to the candelabra. Malahalan al gabe mizbeach hachitzon, afkan al mizbeach hachitzon. So likewise there, it applies to the outer altar. Here too, it applies to the outer altar as well. Oh, or says the Gemara, gilech l'derech zo. You can present it in the alternative manner. Ne'emra eish b'ketoret. We say that there's fire associated with the incense, and we say that there's fire associated with the coal pan. Malahalan b'samuchlo, afkan b'samuchlo. The same way it's stated here, so it's stated here. Okay, near to it. So let's go and continue with this Amud as we sort of bring the discussion a little bit to a close. Talmud Lomar. Now we have another pasuk, and this pasuk tells us as follows: V'lakach melo hamachta gachalei esh me'al hamizbeach milifnei Hashem. Right? That namely, that what is the role of the Kohen Gadol regarding the coal pan? That he takes the pan full of coals from the fire on the altar, on the Mizbeach, okay, before Hashem. Now, what's problematic about this verse? I would suggest as follows. Jeff said that the coal pan and things, what was it come from? The outer altar. Now, was really the outer altar Lifnei Hashem? That would only be the case, I would suggest, if in the structure of the entire Azara, the Mizbeach was right in front of the doors, so to speak, to the Ulam. But that wasn't the case. It was further south. So maybe we have a problem by thinking when it says Mizbeach Milafei Hashem, would that possibly at all be referring to the inner Mizbeach, the one right inside the Heichal? Let's see if my questioning has any validity. Okay? So the Gemara asks, Ezehu Mizbeach shemikzato lefnei Hashem, lo lefnei Hashem? Which altar is it that part of it is before Hashem, but not in its entirety is not before Hashem? Avei Omer, ze Mizbeach hachitzon. This tells us, right, that it must be the outer altar. Okay? Because what happened? Okay? That the western side of the Mizbeach lined up with the entrance to the entranceway to the Ulam, into the Heichal, into the temple. Okay? Ve'itz tarich l'mechtab, says the Gemara. And it was necessary to write, okay, in the pasuk, me'al hamizbeach, from on top of the altar. Ve'itz tarich l'mechtav milifnei Hashem. And it was also necessary to say in the pasuk, right, before Hashem. Why did we need both? Explains the Gemara. De'ikatav rachmana me'al hamizbeach. Because if the pasuk had only said, right, v'lakach melo hamachta gachalayesh me'al hamizbeach, if that's all it had said from on the altar, the Gemara tells us, Hava Amina, I might have thought to say, Ma mizbeach pnimi. Maybe they were talking about the inner altar. Katav Rachmana, and therefore the Torah text specifies Mifnei Hashem, before Hashem. And let's flip it now. Ve'i Katav Rachmana milifnei Hashem. And had the pasuk only written milifnei Hashem, in other words, had been read v'lakach melo hamachta gachai eish milifnei Hashem, which still would have made sense. What happens? Hava amina, I might have said here too, dafka milifnei Hashem, that it has to be part of the section of the larger outdoor mizbeach before Hashem. So therefore, I mean, that fire would have to be in the very corner opposite the entrance of the, right? Which would be rather difficult to have a large pile of wood there for the burning. Okay, so if we go to Mem Vav, Amud Aleph, just a tiny bit of Al Mehai Gita, but from this side or that side, I would say no, Sricha. And therefore, that's why we needed both phrases there. Okay? Right? So we're going to stop right there, because as we go on, we come back really to deal with another issue. Okay? Not one that's brand new, but still remember that issue with Rabbi Meir and the extraneous, the unconsumed parts. What about those? All right. Okay, so he'll deal with that and he'll continue, okay, some discussion on that for a little bit, okay? And ties that in with Shabbat. And then afterwards, okay, it brings us into some other, perhaps let's call it discussions in terms of Shabbat and Yom Kippur as well. Okay, so we'll stop there on the top of Mem Vav Amud Aleph. Everybody, stay well.
Thank you, Reb.
And take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi Green. Be well, all.